I am delighted to have this opportunity, and I feel privileged to be with you and to introduce the panelists today. I think they are truly going to talk about an interesting perspective to global diplomacy or international education diplomacy. We're looking to discussing or exploring issues of education innovation. I believe most of you have already screened to see their topics. Without taking much time, what I would like to do is to introduce the first speaker. I'll give you a bit of a format. I'll introduce all the three speakers now, then I'll be inviting each one at a time, and they will be sharing their own presentation with us and their own experiences. After each speaker, I will maybe add one or two comments, but I'm staying very sensitive to time. So first the three speakers, then invite them individually. After that, we will have one or two questions from me, and then I'll open the floor for the audience. I would like to introduce the first speaker this afternoon. So Kavita Hatipoglu is the Senior Program Associate for the Global Education Team at the Results for Development Institute. Her topic today is on global innovations in ECD. She is connected to the Center for Education Innovations, which is an initiative of Results for Development. Allow me to welcome Kavita to the podium, or to where she is, just to share with us and give her a warm welcome.
I'm Kavita Hatipoglu, and I'm a Senior Program Associate at the Results for Development Institute in Washington, D.C. And we're sort of a hybrid think tank development organization focusing on 4 core areas: education, health, market dynamics, and governance. And so I work on the education team, and one of our primary projects is the Center for Education Innovations. And the core of that program is a website where we've been able to profile over 600 education innovations across the world. And so sort of the original thesis behind developing this project and website was that to know what was out there is extremely difficult. We know that education innovations are cropping up, but there was no way of sort of systematically looking across these innovations. And without understanding what innovations are out there, it's incredibly difficult to understand them, learn from them, and adapt into your practice or influence policymakers. So the original premise was that by profiling all of these programs, we'd be able to look across the different programs. Program implementers would be able to connect with one another and learn from one another and better their practice. And so we've been going about this, as I said, for about just under 2 years now. And so we've obtained over 600 program profiles, of which 80 are in the early childhood field currently. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. Generally, across the early childhood portfolio at Results for Development, so there are 2 separate things. Within education, we're in the development process of establishing an early childhood portfolio. And so as of September, we welcomed a new program director. And so we're really excited. That's sort of a nascent area of work for us, but excited to do more original research and connect to other program implementers and researchers and dive deeper into that field in certain key areas. Within the Center for Education Innovations, as I mentioned, it's been really interesting to look across these 80-plus programs and start to identify what are some of the common trends going on in early childhood. And that's what we hope to do here today. So we've kind of organized these into 5 core buckets of program practice across these programs. And so in the first one, a lot of program implementers who are actually doing early childhood development in centers. So they're running centers and organizations in their areas and really promoting a focus on marginalized children, which would include vulnerable children, children with special needs, in rural populations, hard to access populations. I do realize I should take a step back. So the Center for Education Innovations typically focuses on low and middle income countries, and the entire vision is to surface innovations that will increase equitable access and improve education services to the poor. So all of the innovations in our database are focused on sort of pro-poor models or models that address the needs of low-income and diverse communities. And also to that extent, sorry, how we define innovation, which I should have started with, sorry. We do work with a very inclusive definition of innovation. And one of that is, programs don't have to have started from brand new kernel and be completely new and completely out of the box. But we take a really inclusive view of that and incorporate programs that are maybe adapting to a different need or have changed their practice, programs that are leveraging a practice but in a new context or area, as well as other programs that are partnering with different actors such as the government or other private public sectors to serve their communities. So to go back to the trends that we've noticed in the ECD programs profiled on CEI, as I mentioned, the first one is those who are doing early childhood development services directly. And so within that, there's a lot who also focus on emphasizing play as a medium of learning. And then the holistic programming is another common feature. So services that also then recognize the needs of education and then health, nutrition, parenting services. They're really trying to reach the broad scope of children and recognize the full needs of child development within their centers and services. The second main area that we see programs falling into is sort of teacher training. And so these are organizations that provide services to caregivers or educators. And they work in a variety of ways. One is to build the skills directly of these caregivers and providers. And then other ones focus on training providers in remote areas or those who might be underserved by current training. So an example is in Kenya, the Watoto Wonder Bus, which goes around and is a mobile service to go out to teachers who might be underserved by other means. And then another aspect within teacher training is leveraging women or other community members to train them in early childhood and in responsive caregiving so that they can be not only employed but also then provide services for their communities. The third area in which programs we see falling into is focusing on materials, resources, and infrastructure. So some programs concentrate more on providing books or other activity and learning materials directly to classrooms or in helping classrooms establish their infrastructure or other sort of building services. And so I think one interesting example in this is the Hopo books, which focuses on, in two countries, mostly in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And as you mentioned, stories being central to your learning and development process, they work to repatriate traditional stories within the culture and translate those into books that the communities can use. So really being cognizant of that culture and community link in early childhood services. And the fourth core area is in parenting and community training and support. So I think as we would all agree, as early childhood, you're not just working with the individual child, you have to address the situation and context in which they come, and the family and caregivers and greater community are an integral part of that. And so a lot of programs focus on these parents or other caregivers by training them or training them in the value of early childhood development and why it is important to send your children to services or provide them access and to establish greater buy-in in their communities. And then finally, within the main section, we do see programs, there's definitely a trend amongst programs to be advocates for early childhood within their communities and to engage policymakers and other government systems. And some of these are they've become service providers working in conjunction with the governments, or they're working to build the evidence base and provide that information onto governments, and making sure that ECD maintains a priority. So some of the other emerging themes, and some of the exciting things that we're also seeing within some of these programs are starting to be chains of early childhood providers and services. So examples, AEIO2 in Colombia, and different models included, and then BRAC in Bangladesh. And some of these have very different models, but starting to sort of scale up their services by developing chains. And some of them have interesting sort of cross-subsidization models so that they can make sure to reach the most vulnerable, but while staying more economically viable. And then in addition to sort of the mobile teacher training, we're also seeing mobile early childhood centers. So there are a couple of interesting examples where programs go around to serve either tribal or rural communities that might not otherwise have access to services. In Kazakhstan, there's a mobile Ger kindergarten system which follows the nomadic people. And so from, I think, May to October, they provide these services, and they actually travel with the different communities and moving sort of every couple of weeks alongside the communities. And then finally, some of the other interesting services that we're seeing are those that focus on capacity building for the early childhood centers or organizations. And some of these focus on how they can connect to government systems, be registered, access subsidies, different types of engagement, or providing governance or management support to those leading early childhood centers. So those are some of the themes that we're seeing across the programs profiled in early childhood. As I mentioned, R4D has sort of a nascent early childhood development program that we're looking to continue and build on. And I think some of the global trends in that regard that we're seeing and hoping to address more, I think we're very encouraged overall that early childhood has gained traction across the world. We're seeing it a lot more than previously. In the US, you've got things like Too Small to Fail, or different advocacy campaigns, and different programs that around the world, the issues of early childhood development and the need for addressing children at a young age and comprehensive development systems is really gaining traction, which is great. But I think there's still some challenges that obviously remain. I think for all cultures and communities, and some of those being, there's some fragmentation of the messaging. It's hard for other sectors and people to buy in to early childhood or to understand the concepts fully, when it's hard to actually say, well, this is what a cohesive system looks like. And so you've got issues of how to, once you buy into the idea of, okay, there is a return on investment in early childhood, that's great. Where do you go on from there? What does effective financing look like? How does it look like coordinating across different ministries? And so those are some of the issues that we're hoping to look at more, as well as issues of workforce development, which I think is a pretty common and understandable issue, and integrating early childhood more across the general education system. So I'll stop there. But thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Kavita. And obviously, I can see you're highlighting the idea of definitely the prioritization of early childhood, and also the importance of a multi-sectoral approach in terms of all the different stakeholders that you've involved. Thank you so much. I will go right ahead and invite our next speaker. And the next speaker is Chiedza Mufunde. Chiedza is a research associate at Welded School. Her topic is innovative partnerships for advancing universal primary education, and she will be sharing with us some ideas about what she's doing and what her organization is involved in.
Yes, thank you, Tata.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us today, and thanks for all the stimulating conversations going on in multiple sessions. As Tata mentioned, I'm with Welded School, and I will say clearly that we are not an implementer. We do not have any programs. We are a campaign. We're a global education campaign founded in 2013 by longtime campaigner Sarah Brown, who founded Their World, which is an organization in the UK. And a Welded School is a global education campaign primarily focused on raising more attention and calling for more action to finish the job of Millennium Development Goal 2, which is to achieve universal primary education. And we know today that we have 58 million kids who are out of school around the world, and over half of those, 28 million, are in conflict-affected countries. And we also do know that of those 58 million kids, or of those, of those 58 million kids, 31 are girls. And I say this knowing that it's International Women's Day and thinking about our investments in girls' education and what that looks like. So our job at a Welded School is to bring everybody, to bring all of us in our various capacities in which we work on universal primary education, to raise more noise, to make a lot of noise, and to call on to different governments, donors, that we made the promise in 2000. We have less than 9 months towards the end of 2015, and also to really think about what the global development goals mean. And right now we're already talking about post-2015. But at a Welded School, we're committed to bringing youth, we're committed to bringing businesses, we're bringing faith-based organizations, we're bringing celebrities, and we're bringing NGOs and civil society to raise this noise. And I'll get into a little bit more detail in terms of the constituencies that we engage. But what we are saying today is that we really want the world to pay more attention, and we want our governments to increase their investments in education, especially financially. So as I mentioned, some of the key areas in which we work on, I work primarily in our policy and research team, and we produce advocacy tools to make our work effective, and also to communicate and tell the stories to the various partners that we work with, and especially to those who are responsible to our governments to do more for education. So recently, we just launched the MDG Scorecard, which I have here today, showing who is on target. We know, like I mentioned, we have 58 million kids who are out of school, and we are almost getting to the end of 2015. And honestly, are those kids going to get in school, given how much countries have been doing? So the MDG 2 scorecard assesses the progress towards MDG 2, what countries have been doing, and what needs to be done. And we took a subset of countries that have more than 500,000 children who are out of school. So those are specific countries that have more than 500 children out of school, and we looked at whether they do have a strategy to get the remainder of the children in school, and what has been their track record in investing in education, looking at their government expenditure in education since 2000, and also what number of kids do they have they put in school since 2000? Because we do have countries, for example, like India, that have made incredible progress since 2000, from 16 million kids out of school to currently about 1.3 million. So we looked at that assessment and what this tool does. Of course, before I get into what this tool can do for our work and even for your work as well in advocating for universal primary education, some of the results were pretty shocking. Of the 29 countries that we looked at, 20 out of those countries are conflict-affected countries. And remember, I mentioned that about 28 million kids who are out of school are in conflict-affected countries. And we know that in 2014, only 1% of humanitarian funding went into education in emergencies. There is great need, but there is no investment into education in emergencies. Of the countries that we looked at as well, 15 of those countries had set a target. They said, you know, by 2015 or 2030, we hope to have achieved the goal. And only 4 of the 29 countries had invested the recommended 20% of government expenditure into education, according to the EFA recommendation for how much should government spend on education is 20% of their national budget. It could be 6% of their GNP as a variation, but only 4 of those countries had invested the recommended levels. So clearly, if you put in the money, we can see the results. And for those countries, so South Africa, for example, and Ghana, some of the countries that have spent 20% of their national budget on education. And they're also the 2 countries that we have sort of deemed as they have made strong progress. So we are really, really trying to put pressure onto governments. And what I really value about this too is that we are giving the responsibilities to the governments who do have the duty to achieve universal primary education, and also because this is a promise that they made. I have a colleague who always says, you can't make promises to children and not make them, right? You have to say what you say you're going to do. I will stop talking about the MDG scorecard, but I brought a couple copies, and we also do have it online. It really gives a very basic overview of a very complex issue, but we do think that what we found in this MDG2 scorecard gives us a sense of what needs to be done and the potential that if we put in the money, we can achieve some of the results, especially for children who might never get a chance to get their foot in the classroom. In addition to some of our policy and advocacy work, we also focus on the key barriers to education: child marriage, child labor, education in emergencies, of course, and also discrimination against girls. Some of the tools that we use in our campaign is rapid response. So that means really shifting and thinking about our strategy in a rapidly changing world. And I think that's a theme for this conversation as well, that how do we constantly shift and think of our strategies in a world that's changing? And that's something we do. An example I'll mention and share is after the kidnapping of the girls in Chibok, Nigeria, the Global Business Coalition for Education, which we work with very closely, was in touch with some of the businesses in Nigeria and worked to set up the Safe Schools Initiative. And what the Safe Schools Initiative does is to really rethink about the protection of education, given that also attacks on schools have been increasing, and we're actually at a record high in 2014. So through that initiative, and a lot of money has been coming in through the Nigerian government, through some international donors, but then also the Nigerian business community to get some of the schools from the northeast part of Nigeria to go to boarding schools in other parts of the country where they feel much safer. And we've launched the same initiative in Pakistan. And the inspiration of those initiatives has been the increasing attacks on schools. And it's part of the rapid response and really thinking, what could we do now to address some of these challenges? Another very exciting part of our work, which is one of our core strategies and also a big global call to action. Last year at the UN General Assembly, we launched the Up for School campaign, which is also the way we got to connect with ACEI here in Washington, DC. And the Up for School campaign is a global petition that we launched in September 2014, really coming from our youth, our global youth ambassadors, which is a network of over 500 young people in 85 different countries who are working with their local advocacy efforts on universal primary education. And we have a program for those young people. It's a year-long program, and we just had our second cohort initiated a couple weeks ago. And through this petition, this is a global call to action to say, we want to hold our governments accountable. 2015 is coming up, and there's still something that we can do. And I think more than thinking about whether we'll get 58 million kids into school, it's also thinking about what can we do to make the plan and to make to strategize to ensure that those plans are in place. And I'm going to read for you. If you are on a computer or on a laptop or on your phone, if you do upforschool.org, you also see exactly the same page that you see when you visit that website. But I'm just going to read just to get to my next point. So the Up for School campaign or petition. Dear world leader, president, or prime minister, we, the world's youth, teachers, parents, and global citizens appeal to our governments to keep their promise made at the United Nations in 2000 to ensure out-of-school children gain their right to education before the end of 2015. We're standing up to bring an end to the barriers preventing girls and boys from going to school, including forced work and early marriage, conflict and attacks on schools, exploitation and discrimination. All children deserve the opportunity to learn and achieve their potential. We are up for school. Do you agree with this? Are you up for school? You could well be up for school. So this is one way we are working through our campaign to have a unifying voice, to really put pressure, because nothing does change without pressure. And we're continuing to work on the campaign, collecting as many signatures as possible. As I mentioned, some of our constituents, the Global Business Coalition for Education has over 100 companies that are committed to bringing education through their various means, and they're really up for school and supporting this campaign. Our global youth ambassadors, the ones I mentioned, the over 500 young people, they are collecting signatures in their communities, in their schools, at churches around the world, supporting this campaign. We do have over 30 faith-based organizations representing some of the major religions who are also collecting signatures and who are up for school and supporting this. We do also have a good number of celebrities who have joined this campaign and supporting all of our efforts. And all this is to say that with one clear message to really demonstrate that we do need action on education is very important, because these are issues we've been talking about for many, many years, even before I was born. And I think that really exerting that pressure is really, really important. So please do join Up for School campaign through your organizations or in any different ways, or do add your voice by signing the petition as well. And we do hope that you continue in your work on the ground, implementing, supporting and promoting universal primary education. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chiedza. And I could see when we think about the concept of innovation, we tend to touch on the terminology or the core values or the key ideas on global education diplomacy, and one of those is intellectual flexibility. And I could see that right now, because when you're presenting, the first thing you said, well, I came to Up for School. If you are on your cell phone and on your iPad, and literally I was looking around and I noted a number of you, I will not go as far as to say it was clear, it's somewhat intergenerational. Maybe some millennials got to that really quick, but I noted some. How many of you went to your cell phone a little bit, or iPad? For note taking, and also, so that's the innovation. We are no longer waiting. You actually can use your phone. You can use your iPad.
I should also add that our digital base is one of, I think I'm off. Our digital base is one of the biggest ways through which we have been bringing people from all over the world. We have over 200 million people who are connected to various other campaigns. So yes, technology is one lever that we've been really flexing in this work. Thanks.
Right, and thank you. That's what I was going to talk about. Either we need to be thinking, am I in the analog or digital generation? So that's really something I'm getting used to. But at the same time, it's just to recognize the importance of not just the interconnectedness and the interdependence that we have across the globe, but also the this information superhighway. You just mentioned that figure, 200 million. That information superhighway, the social media, and how it's being used for some of your buzzwords that I heard were campaign, UPE, Millennium Development Goals, advocacy, scorecard, strategy, Up for School. And as I am moving ahead to the next speaker, I'll just tell you that my interest has been piqued because you talk about policy and research. And I'm curious from your research at some point whether you, or how you go about that issue of gender discrimination, and whether you use the idea of looking at gender as a tool for analysis of what's happening within a community and within our globe. All right, thank you, Chiedza.
Thank
Now, allow me to invite Courtney White. Courtney will be presenting to us on the topic of innovations in teacher preparation for global competency. Courtney is a Director of Partnerships for World Survey, and that's SAVVY. And I'm curious to see World Survey and teacher competencies and standards. Those two, with a high-stakes testing environment. I'd like to hear what you have to share. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. I had a slide I was just going to go ahead and put up. Are we able to get that on the screen? Yeah, okay. We'll just go ahead and leave that there. So it's been such a treat. Thank you to be part of such an extraordinary panel. And this has just been an amazing conference, so much preparation. So thank you to all those behind the scene and those out in front of the scene. And then also in all of the different sessions, it's just been so rich and exciting. So I'm from World Savvy, and our mission is to educate and engage youth to learn, work, and thrive. That was a word that was used this morning as well, as responsible global citizens in the 21st century. And central to our work is the belief that global competence is a foundational component of quality education for all students, regardless of geography, socioeconomic status, or other potential what may be perceived as barriers. And we're particularly interested in ensuring that students have the opportunity to acquire the kind of not only knowledge and understanding, but also the skills and dispositions that will prepare them for college, career, and life in a global society, and help them identify as global citizens who are motivated to contribute to peace, justice, and sustainability in our world. So there's some overlaps with some of the language that I've seen with the diplomacy education, for sure, and it's really wonderful to see those overlaps. The work that we do, we work with students and with teachers. We do some student-facing work, and we also do professional development training for teachers, and then now we're doing more and more work with schools and districts in terms of systemic change and significant reform. The other thing that we do is some evaluation with schools to see where they are with global competence, if they're starting to use it at all or even know what it is, and if so, to what degree. We do consulting services, so sometimes when we go in, it's not just with the superintendents or administrators, but we meet with the security staff, we meet with the parent community, we meet with receptionists and administrative staff, so that we get a cross-section of working with people on what people believe global competence is. And many missions and visions today that we're seeing in schools and in education systems, we're seeing that our goal, our mission is to prepare students to be successful in global society. And so then when we go into the schools or districts, we say, well, what does that look like? And oftentimes there's kind of this blank kind of face, and it's in the strategic plan, or it's in the mission, it's in the vision, but the actual kind of practicality of putting that into action hasn't really truly been thought through. And so that's where we come in and really work with the teachers and the students and the administrator, really from a systemic, holistic point of view. And what we've recently done is seeing that there was really a need for this nationally to populate both the United States as well as other areas with the opportunity for this type of learning. Is we've developed a program with Teachers College, Columbia University. It's an Ivy League graduate credit certificate program. It's the first of its kind. It's an online 15-month program with synchronous sessions where people meet from all over, and then some asynchronous sessions where people work independently after school, so they can continue to be in practice and marry theory and practice and apply these concepts. And it also involves a fieldwork component. So we just started this last fall. It hasn't even been a full year. So in terms of innovation, this is really exciting to be bringing this work forth. So far, we have I believe, 23 different states participating. Of the people who are participating in the program, 1/3 are from K through 5th grade, 1/3 are from 6th through 8th, and 1/3 are from high school, which is really fascinating. I thought initially that it would primarily be high school. And we also have teachers from all different disciplines. Initially, I thought it would be predominantly social studies. We have a physical education teacher, we have art teacher, we have music teachers, we have English language arts, we have foreign language teachers, we have administrators, we have nonprofit leaders in education. So it's really interesting to see the interest in this program and the opportunity that it's providing. The other interesting thing about it is that we have also seen districts beginning to send cohorts. So in Oakland, for example, we have a district that's sending 3 teachers through the program in order to go back to the district and make recommendations as their capstone project in terms of how to turnkey the program. So the district itself is investing in the teacher and seeing the value of the professional development to transform the system. We also have another school, Edina, which is in Minnesota, and they're sending 10 teachers through the program. And what was really fascinating about this particular superintendent is that he opened it up to every single teacher and made it a competitive process. And we got many, many applications. And then he said, okay, this is a competitive process. You've been chosen as the 10 teachers. You decide what we're going to do as a district, as you're learning through this program, and gave them full, just complete opportunity for them to envision what was needed and to come back with the recommendations, what they wanted to do individually and collectively to transform the work. So just really quickly, I'll just share the global competence matrix. I'm sorry, I didn't have enough sheet for every single person, but I have, I think, a set on all of the tables. It's not to be an all-inclusive list. And in fact, what we usually do, and what I should back up and do is say, what is global competence? And this was defined by EdSteps, the Chief State School Officers, as well as Asia Society, had worked on this definition. And global competence is the disposition and capacity to understand and act on issues of global significance. And so we see there's the core concepts, which are world events and global issues, even local to global issues in terms of your local community connecting to global, and having these core concepts. And then there's the values and attitudes, skills and behaviors. Oftentimes in education, we teach for knowledge, not necessarily for wisdom or for understanding. And so when we begin to integrate values and attitudes and behaviors, taking knowledge and applying that knowledge, and utilizing a variety of skills, including things like being able to frame questions in different ways, and skills of understanding or valuing different perspectives than your own, that then education begins to shift. And so what we're really interested in is catalyzing a new paradigm. In many cases, in schools, students are isolated for speaking different languages and coming into the school, or they're disenfranchised, or they're put into special education classes, or the ability to participate collectively within the community. There's a variety of different silos. And so rather than a deficit model, we really see this as an asset model, and it kind of flips things upside down in a way in which everybody's valued to contribute, all students, to our global society and to our local communities. So that's just a little bit. I think I want to save time for questions as well. And it's really exciting to be here and share the work of World Savvy as well as the Global Competence Certificate Program.